All right, so I'm super excited about today's video. I finally get to give you my first impressions on this. This is the Bambu Lab A1. It's Bambu's latest 3D printer. They're touting this more as a beginner or entry-level 3D printer, but I will say that the performance is anything but entry-level. Let's get started. What's good, everybody? Ken here. You're watching OriginaldoBo, and this is the Bambu Lab A1. Now, I've had this 3D printer for the past 15 days, and I'm gonna give you my first impressions. This is not going to be a full review. I don't think 15 days is long enough to give a full detailed thought and review on this, but this should be enough to let you know what I think of this printer. So with that being said, let's just jump into the build design. So this is a strong departure from Bambu's previous designs on the P1P and X1. This is a bed slinger design, meaning that that bed moves forwards and backwards. It also has linear rails on this for the first time. There's no rollers on this whatsoever. It does have a belt drive system, but it is a linear rail system, which I think is fantastic. This always makes for a very, very smooth experience. If I had to say this printer resembled anything, I would say it definitely resembles a Prusa Mini just a little bit. I have to make mention of that because I've been told that before from people that have seen this. That was the first thing that they told me, is that's what it looked like. But I think that this has a smaller footprint, and overall it just looks much more aesthetically appealing. It is a direct drive printer, meaning that the filament goes right from the roll directly into the hot end. The hot end is a stainless steel hot end, which is fantastic. It can reach temperatures up to 300 degrees Celsius, so it should be able to handle most any filament that you throw at it. There is also a brand new flow calibration sensor that is pressure sensitive in the nozzle itself, which helps test the layers that it's actually generating. So if you have that enabled, the new flow calibration, it'll actually help you calibrate each layer and give you much better results when printing. I thought it was gimmicky at first, but then I tried it and I actually do see the results. I do see the differences, and we'll touch on like what I think of the layers that I get from this versus, let's say, the P1P or my X1, because I think it's actually pretty impressive, and I can't believe they put it in a printer of this size and price. So the build volume is small. It's 180 by 180 by 180. I think that's gonna be most expert level 3D printers' biggest gripe. That's one of the things I've seen in the forums. Why didn't Bambu release a larger printer? Well, you gotta understand that when you're building something entry level, not everybody needs like this massive, gigantic printer. Not everybody's printing things for sale on Etsy, so having a printer that appeals to everyone is equally as important as enterprise level 3D printers. That's how you gather market share and you gain more interest. You gotta give something so they can actually get started with, and I think that's what they've done here. It does ship with a textured PEI build plate. It is a double-sided PEI build plate, so if one side starts wearing, you just flip it over. I've switched all of my printers over to PEI build plates, and I've had no problems with bed adhesion. I've tested multiple prints, difficult prints, and I haven't had a single print come off the build plate during my testing, which is very, very important. It also has an LCD screen built in. It's touch capacitive, so you can just easily navigate through your prints. It's a very fun, intuitive interface on this. They've definitely geared this very much so towards the beginner. And also when you start up the printer and you start a print or finish a print, it's always like a celebration. There's all these fun little noises like you just won a video game. And at first I had to like play it back again. I had to do it all over again because I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but it's a very fun tone. I'm gonna go ahead and play that tone for you right now. So I don't know, it's just something about that tone that makes me happy. I know it's a silly thing to talk about, but it's just something I wanted to make mention of because none of the other printers that Bambu sells does something similar. So it is nice to have an audible tone when things are completed. There is a power supply. That power supply is built into the printer, so you just have a singular cord coming out the back end. There's also a power button directly on the back side of the printer. On the left side of the printer, you have a micro SD card slot. You also have 2 AMS ports. However, as of right now, this only works with 1 AMS, so it's 4 filaments going into the printer if you use the AMS Lite. Speaking of the AMS Lite, let's talk about it because they've completely redesigned this, which is very, very different. By default, the A1 is a very small footprint, but when you add the AMS, you have this extra piece sitting off to the side of the printer. And it is a little bit awkward sitting there. It looks a little weird, but it does work very well in practice. One of my favorite things about the AMS Lite is the fact that I can use cardboard rolls, I can use plastic rolls. Really, it is agnostic when it comes to different filaments, which is fantastic. As long as the filament rolls are a standard size, you're not going to have any issues. As long as you're not using those industrial huge rolls, you shouldn't have a single problem. I have multiple different filaments on here now. I've got Overture, I've got Ceramic, I've got another Overture, I've got Bamboo filament, and yes, it still auto detects. It uses those NFC tags that auto detect the filament. If you're not using a filament that has an NFC tag where it can auto detect, you can go ahead and program that filament into the slicer so it knows what it is each and every time, which I think is great. The filaments are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and it runs through a Bowden tube system. I do want to make mention that the AMS is still not compatible with TPU filaments. If you try to use TPU for a multicolored print, there is a good potential that it will jam. Ask me how I know, because I did try without talking to my rep. I just gave it a whirl, and I did have some problems with jamming. I will say this is a lot easier AMS to operate on. If you do get a jam, it's really easy to unstuck it. Unstuck it, I don't even know if that's a word, but it's easy to fix it if you do get a jam. So rest assured that it is easy to operate on. All right, so moving back over to the extruder, if you do have to do any maintenance to the extruder, it's really easy to pop that front cover off and you can pull the hot end off. It's, again, very intuitive. There's no magnets on that front piece of the extruder. Unlike the P1P and X1, there was a magnet system, which was easy just to pop it off. You just gotta apply a little bit of force, and this just has a little bit of a clip. I actually rather prefer this than the magnet system. The magnet system, I've had them fall off, and even though it didn't hit anything, I've had them fall off during a print, and then it would stop the print, and I had to come back to the office and reattach it so it can start printing. This has not been a problem whatsoever, which I do like. It does have the auto unload and cut feature, which is fantastic. That's what this little piece is. This is the striker that will actually cut the filament. It'll come back, smack into this, cut the filament. It has a purge right here. And yes, this thing poops, and it poops a lot. This is all the poop that I have from 3 prints. It made an absolute purple and gray mess on my desk. So it's very, very important. I would say the first thing you should do if you purchase this printer is print some sort of mechanism to capture that poop before it hits your desk or floor, especially if you have animals or young children. You don't want this hitting the floor and them ingesting it. It's something that you do have to be mindful of, that this doesn't just poop like the P1P where it just comes down this little poop chute. This is a really weird conversation that we're having right now, but it doesn't just come down a poop chute. It actually, as it's going up on the print, it's slinging the poop. It's throwing poop like a crazy ape at a zoo in the Bronx. It's just throwing poop. This got really weird really quick. But that's what I'm saying, is it'll sling it far. So you need something to catch that. So print something out that can be capable of doing it. There's a lot of little devices that can capture that so it doesn't hit the floor, but it does poop. All right, so let's talk about the filaments that this is capable of printing. Because this is an entry-level 3D printer, you should expect some form of compromises when it comes to filaments. So filaments that it is capable of printing is going to be PLA, PETG, TPU, PLA+, and that's about it. Now, there is a recommended list that Bambu has with this printer, and ASA, ABS, carbon fiber materials are not on that list. And that could be because this is not an enclosed structure, although you may be able to try printing those. I did not try those filaments because it wasn't actually recommended by Bambu to be able to print those, so I did not test those. Now, if you're interested in me testing those, I can test those later on down the road to see how it does printing, but I only tested PETG, PLA+, PLA, and TPU, which it did absolutely awesome, kick-ass on all of those filaments. So on the table here, I have a couple of different prints that I've printed over the past couple of weeks. We have some TPU ducts. These are for the DJI Avata. And now with this, I can only really print one of these at a time. And the way I did this was I basically put this on the printer sort of catty-cornered like this. And I can print one in about 1 hour and 45 minutes. Again, these are ribbed riders. They do take some time. I do have to print them with supports. I print it with SaneSmart TPU. It's a 95A TPU. I printed it through the external piece. You can put another Bowden tube, have the filament run up through here and down into the extruder. Basically what I do is I have a external spool holder that I also plug in to keep that filament dry. It's really important with TPU that it doesn't get wet. It's sort of humid here, so I don't like to keep a spool holder on the backside. I like to keep it in its own little thing plugged in so I can keep it dry. Very, very important. But these printed absolutely excellent. The flow calibration on this is incredible. I just used the standard Bambu Lab profile, and the only thing I did was tweak the supports to my taste so I can peel them off easily. And I gotta say, I'm very, very impressed with the layers on these. They look absolutely flawless. They look just as good, if not better, than my P1P, and they're right on par with my Bambu Lab X1, which is incredible for the price of this printer. I can't stress that enough. Then I moved over to some multicolored prints. I wanted to print my DJI love handles. These are for the RC. These typically take about 3.5 hours if I'm not doing a multicolor. Now, multicolor on the X1 or P1P, it's about 11 hours and 45 minutes for these to complete. If I'm printing 2 of them at a time, 2 sets, we're at about 12 hours, so not much more time to print 2 sets. It almost makes more sense to print in bulk when you are doing multicolor prints. But I will say that these look absolutely exceptional. The layer lines on this are incredible. The detail is phenomenal. And the best part is I did not build a profile for this. That means I didn't do any tweaking. I just used the standard Bambu Lab PLA, tough PLA profiles, and it did awesome. These came out great. And the other thing is I want to say is I even tested the support. I've had some issues with the supports coming off, but these supports break off perfectly, and it's leaving nothing behind, which is very, very important. This was something I used to struggle with the Creality machines. I don't struggle with that with this. So it's able to do the non-multicolor prints in 3 hours, which is still very fast. It's almost just as fast as the P1P. We're talking about minutes. These are like minutes apart as far as speed goes. And when we talk about the benchies, you'll really, that point should be driven home. So overall, multicolored prints look amazing. I then went ahead and decided to print more of a fun print. I'm a big fan of Gengar, and I really just love this print. This is a sort of more of a designer print. It has like a lot of detail in here, and I wanted to print this as fast as I possibly could. I really didn't tweak the profile all that much, just a little bit. I didn't do anything to the flow. I didn't do anything to the layer lines. I printed at 0.2, and I think it did really, really fantastic. The points on this are absolutely perfect. It swapped the filament just fine. I didn't have a single issue with swapping the filament. It did 3 swaps. It did white, purple, and red just for the eyes. And overall, it looks great. And there's all this little detail in the print, which came out phenomenal. And these points are super, super sharp. I did not realize how sharp that was, but this looks amazing. This print took roughly about 9 hours for it to complete. I did have to shrink this print down because this was a much bigger model. Like, it's really meant to be a bigger model. But for it to fit on this 180 by 180 build volume, I had to shrink it down, but it took 9 hours for that to complete. And it's just solid. It feels awesome. I then went ahead and printed this. This is the color swatch. Bambu included like different colors of their filaments and the different materials, and they offer a swatch that you can actually print so you can put the little filaments in here. And the layers look amazing. Like on the back side of this, this almost looks like something you could buy online. It really does make a difference to toggle on that flow calibration. So I can't stress that enough. There is one takeaway: if you buy this printer, make sure you are using that new toggle. It is not a gimmick. I know it takes just a slight bit longer for the start of print, but holy shit, does it make a difference when it comes to your layer lines. They look awesome. All right, let's talk benchies because, you know, that's a thing. So these benchies took 14 minutes for them to complete. Now these are two, I'll be right back. All right, so these benchies took 14 minutes a piece to print. Both of these are different materials. We have Duramic PLA Plus and we have Overture PLA Plus, and both of them look very, very similar. And it's probably, you know, they probably are more similar than different. It's probably just because they are different colors, but I wanted to print different manufacturers' brands using the Bambu Lab profile, because what I was trying to see is, does this flow calibration really sort of work with different filaments, and can you get very similar and consistent results with different filaments? And the answer is yes. The only time that you can't get very, very consistent results is if you're doing a multicolor print and you have multiple different filaments. It's only going to calibrate against one of those filaments. So either it'll calibrate against the first color, like so I did Overture PLA Plus, and it definitely calibrated for this, but the white is not quite as good. That's the Bambu Lab filament. It's not as good as everything else because it didn't calibrate for that filament. So that's the only downside if you are doing multicolor prints, but overall, these prints 14 minutes on a bed slinger. I can't even stress how impressive that actually is and how good these actually look. So with that being said, in conclusion, this is pretty much, I would say, the best option for a beginner. If you're somebody that is just starting out and you're looking for a 3D printer that is out of the box ready, that is a key here, out of the box ready, where you just have to disassemble the shipping brackets and calibrate it, this is the printer for you if you're a beginner. I cannot recommend this printer enough, and I've been looking at a lot of printers recently that are really geared for beginners, and I gotta say, this one definitely is like at the top of the list. $369 for just the printer itself. If you go with the AMS, you're looking at another $100, $469. It's an absolute steal to be able to achieve prints like this and really not know anything about 3D printing. If you don't want to mess around with the slicer, you don't want to tune things, you don't want to calibrate stuff to a never-ending ends, then this is definitely a great option. Again, speaking to my experts out there, this may not be for you, but if you have a large operation and you have limited space and you need something that can print smaller objects, then yes, this would be a fantastic option for those of you running enterprise level operations like myself. I have a lot of models that I can print maybe 2, 3 of them on here and still be able to keep the production value going and still achieve similar quality or better quality than what I get from my P1P or X1. So, first impression, I'm impressed with this. I really do think that this is an awesome printer, and it makes me excited to see how Bambu progresses their ecosystem, because if this is this good and this AMS is this awesome, I can't wait to see what they do next at more of an enterprise level. So first impression, absolute thumbs up. If you have any questions, I'll be in the comments answering any and all questions. I'll also have some links for some of these models. Of course, my 3D print store if you want to go ahead and check out some of the things we sell. But yeah, there you go. That's my thoughts, first impressions of the Bambu Lab A1. I will catch you in the next video. Stay original.
I heard they checking for me, no one checking on me, so I had to go run up a check. I got the message on me, ain't no flexing on me, my attorney gon' call and collect. Blessings on blessings for me, my successes only made them envious, they got upset. I had to put all their egos in check. I want the money, the power,